think the coolest thing about the Watson is that you can follow the thing that you're most passionate about rather than the thing that they want to see. Because there isn't a thing that they want to see. There isn't a formula that they want your project to fit into. There are people going this year, I have 10 countries on my list, and I noticed some other fellows have 1 or 2. So it's not about how many things you want to do. And the range of topics is immense. So really, this is a fellowship that you can go for because you want to do your own thing. How cool is that? And then the other thing that's really cool is that, as Professor Ducombe said, everything changes. Everything's up in the air once you're on the ground, right? And that's a reality of research, and it's a reality of life. And a lot of academic fellowships, and no offense to those academic fellowships, but a lot of other experiences that you can apply for don't take that into account necessarily. And we're kind of used to a very prescribed situation where we're sitting in a classroom and we know exactly what's expected of us. So maybe we might go for those thinking that we know exactly what we want to do, but I would argue that we don't know exactly what we want to do. I don't think any of us know exactly what we want to do. If we could do anything, I think that's part of the deal, is you figure that out along the way. So my project for next year, we'll see what it is actually my project, but I think my project for next year will be to travel Europe from west to east, and then go to Brazil is the plan right now. Looking at the way Roma, which is the more politically correct word for gypsies, the way Roma communities interact and communicate with the main population in each of the places that I visit. What the barriers are to that communication, and how sort of history of marginalization and of difference, and in turn the legal structures that have been built up and the historical prejudice, how all those things affect people's lives and people's living situations on the ground. And I think that the first thing people ask me is why? Why did I pick this topic? So I'll try to answer that succinctly. If you have more questions, I welcome them. But this summer, the beginning of the summer, I'd been thinking about the Watson for a really long time, because it was one of the few that, before Steve was here, but that was one of the few things that Colgate really sort of wants people to get involved in and wants people to try for. And I didn't know if I had a project that I was that excited about that I wanted to do for a whole year. And then the beginning of this past summer, I was thinking about it, and it just kind of came to me one day. I've been interested in Roma issues since I was a young teenager. Since my dad's a photojournalist, and he went on a trip to Romania and brought back a story about a specific community of Roma community, and then he got all passionate about it and got involved in the Roma diaspora in Montreal, which is where I grew up. And that exposure caught my interest, but I've never had an opportunity to study it in school. And then, or specifically in school, there aren't really classes on Roma history. And then the fact that the Roma community is a worldwide diaspora, to think of this is a fellowship where they'll just let me fly across the world, I can actually do this research with this fellowship. And it's not with every type of research fellowship that you would be able to do a project like this. It was really important to me to try to go to many different places to look at the structural differences and the sort of differences in living situation and cultural difference, to be repetitive. And so it just clicked, and then I had to go through the long and complicated process of explaining to everybody I knew why I was so passionate about this, because I knew that I was. And I think that that's where the transformative experience of my fellowship application process really happened. I remember before I had to explain it to the very intimidating panel and the advisors, and they're not
we really try not to be.
And all the interviewers, but before I had to explain it to all them, I had to explain it to my parents. So it was actually, my dad knows that I'm interested in social justice in general, and he knows that I'm interested in travel, and he knows that I'm interested in Roma issues, but my stepmom didn't know me back, she didn't know him either back when he went to Romania. So she didn't really understand why why this issue. So I remember one conversation at the end of the summer when I was sitting down with the two of them, and she just kept being like, but why? Like, why are you interested in social justice? And I was like, well, because there are situations, historical and cultural situations out of these people's control that leads to such prejudice that influences their everyday lives, and that's not right. And she was like, but why do you think it's not right? I was like, well, because everybody should have an equal opportunity, and that's just a given. And she was like, why do you think it's a given? And she made me go down the line and keep defending myself. And that conversation is what led to my essay, and what led to both of my essays, and I think to why my application is so strong. Because I realized that my question wasn't only what are the structural barriers and what are the barriers in general to Roma populations, for Roma populations across Europe, but also why do I care so much? And so part of my project is actually going to be interviewing scholars and activists who work with Roma issues across all these countries and figuring out why they care so much and why they keep on pursuing, why they keep on pushing for these changes that look like they might never come, and realizing that that's what I was really trying to figure out was totally transformative for me. It changed the way I looked at what I was going to do next year when I had no actual belief that I was going to get the Watson, and they changed the way I looked at myself. So I definitely would advocate that it's worth it to apply, even if not that many people get it in the end. There's definitely a chance. I can give an example of that, as weird as that is to say. The other thing I'd like to say is that during the process, I think during the Colgate process, the most important piece for me was actually in the fall. There was a talk where we had the director of the Watson Fellowship Skyped in. And I thought that, when he Skyped in, people were asking him questions about what kind of projects would be good and how we should figure out what our idea is. And he sort of explained to us that the Watson Fellowship isn't interested in investing in a project or in the outcome of a project, but they're investing in people. And when you think about it that way, when you think about the fact that you have to figure out who you are so that you can explain and show who you are to the fellowship committee to try to convince them that you're worth investing in, essentially. That you're worth their energy and that you're going to make the most out of this year. That's what's going to make you the most appealing candidate possible. So, unlike with some experiences where it's really a process of figuring out what somebody else wants you to do or wants you to say, I would argue that this one is really about figuring out who you are so that you can explain that convincingly. And honestly, if who you are, who your recommenders say you are, and who you are in an interview all match, that's also very important. So even if you come up with this great project, but it's not really who you are, then, I've never interviewed anybody, but I think based on what he said, it sounded like that was really what was important.